Don't worry, it's 11:24. I'm not going to be reading that book anymore. Not like this. The truth of the matter is if you had to actually go to war, who would you go to war with? And when? It wasn't about war at the time. It was a genuine, sincere question. Things were happening. It was some ancestral thing. Maybe you want to argue these days. Well, it wasn't yours! Yeah, well, that barcode wasn't yours originally, was it? That's why they gave it to you. To let you know. It's not yours. Right? When I met him, he told me he was a veteran of the United States Air Force. It meant something. Like it or not, those are my people. I found this book. Didn't have a price tag on it. It's the way it should be. A Call to Service. Rabbis Jacob M. Rothschild, Alexander D. Good, Sidney M. Lefkowitz, and Roland B. Gittleson, and World War II, by Edward S. Shapiro. Has his email address at the bottom. This book was published in 2019. It's a pretty long article. Let's get started. World War II was the great watershed of the 20th century. The historian Michael Bess's Choices Under Fire, Moral Dimensions of World War II, argues that the war provided the single greatest catalyst of change in the 20th century, bringing about or sharply accelerating deep transformations in virtually every domain of human life, from geopolitics to social movements, from economies to high culture. Put all the pieces together, and you have a historical watershed of the first magnitude, like the French Revolution, one of those markers we tacitly use in delimiting the major eras of history. The transformations resulting from the war were extremely evident in the United States. Whether one is concerned with scientific developments, the history of science and higher education, demographic migrations, the growth of government, the status of women, race relations, industrialization, urbanization and suburbanization, or the emergence of America as a world power, the war was crucial in instituting or accelerating change. The war's impact was particularly great in the South. In perhaps no other region, with the exception of California, did the war bring more abrupt change. It diminished the isolation of much of the South's rural population, encouraged a flight from farms and small towns to factories and cities, and quickened the undermining of the region's racial mores. The effect of the war was especially felt in myriad ways by the millions of Southerners who served in the military during the war and returned to the South with different perspectives and ambitions. Increasingly, after the war, the South came to resemble the rest of America. The year 2020 marks the 75th anniversary of the war's end and is perhaps an appropriate time to consider its legacy as exemplified in the lives of 4 Jewish military chaplains. It is impossible to write of the history of America's Jews since 1945 without considering the effect of the war in general and the influence of these rabbis in particular. These 4 Jewish chaplains, in the history of Jewish chaplaincy generally, influenced the ways American Jews were perceived after the war and facilitated their entry into the American mainstream. The history of Jewish military chaplaincy reflects the broader theme of Jewish acceptance in the United States. Jewish chaplaincy in the American military began in the Civil War, and the role and numbers of Jewish chaplains radically increased during World War I and grew even greater during World War II. The Jewish Welfare Board, working through various committees such as the Committee on Army and Navy Religious Affairs, the Publications Committee, and the Responsa Committee, was responsible for providing the Jewish chaplains requested by the military, supplying their needs and publicizing their activities. More than 300 Jewish military chaplains served during the war, comprising more than half of all American rabbis. A contribution of chaplains and other Jews to the war effort was publicized by the JWB's Bureau of War Records, which was eager to refute the canard that Jews shirked their military responsibilities. Undoubtedly, the work of the Bureau of War Records contributed to the post-war decline of anti-Semitism, as did popular culture produced by Jews. On many levels, this essay concerns images of patriotism, unity, and selfless sacrifice, the image that the war and related events exerted on calls for a just, fairer, and more equitable society, and the images projected by the rabbis' actions and cultural depictions that contributed to a decline of anti-Semitism. It is the story of the impact of these and other images of social change. America's Jews had a stake in the war unlike that of other Americans. The nation's major enemy was bent on the annihilation of European Jewry, and America's Jews never doubted that it was a good war, to use the title of Studs Terkel's best-selling book. Although they numbered only 3% of the general population, Jews exerted a massive impact on the nation's understanding of the war. The most popular novel of each of the military services was written by a Jewish veteran of the war. Herman Wouk's The Caine Mutiny for the Navy, Norman Mailer's The Naked and the Dead, and Irwin Shaw's The Young Lions for the Army, Joseph Heller's Catch-22 for the Air Force, and Leon Uris's Battle Cry for the Marines. The same impact occurred in American cinema as well as in classical, popular, and Broadway music. The Jewish-owned Warner Brothers studio produced such classic wartime films as Confessions of a Nazi Spy, Casablanca, Destination Tokyo, Mission to Moscow, Pride of the Marines, and Air Force, while other Jewish-owned studios came out with additional important World War II films. Among the most significant classical music compositions on the war written during the 1940s were Aaron Copland's Fanfare for the Common Man, Mark Blitzstein's Airborne Symphony, Morton Gould's American Salute, Leonard Bernstein's Jeremiah Symphony, and Richard Rodgers' score for the television series Victory at Sea. Jews wrote the lyrics and music for such popular wartime songs as Somewhere Over the Rainbow, The Last Time I Saw Paris, There'll Be Blue Birds Over the White Cliffs of Dover, Praise the Lord and Pass the Ammunition, and When the Lights Go On Again, All Over the World. The most popular Broadway musical during the war was Richard Rodgers' and Oscar Hammerstein II's Oklahoma, in which Curly proclaims, "The land I belong to is grand." Arguably, the three most iconic American images of the war are Joe Rosenthal's photograph of the raising of the flag at Iwo Jima, Alfred Eisenstadt's picture of the Times Square celebration at the end of the war, and the United States postal stamp of the four chaplains who perished when their ship, the USAT Dorchester, was torpedoed by a German submarine near Greenland. Alexander D. Good was a Jewish chaplain aboard the Dorchester. Two other Jewish military chaplains, Sidney M. Lefkowitz and Roland B. Gittleson, gave two of the most famous orations of the war, while Jacob N. Rothschild was the first Jewish chaplain of World War II to see action. Three of these rabbis, Good, Lefkowitz, and Rothschild, were Southerners, or at least adopted Southerners if one's definition of the South includes Washington, D.C., which is south of the Mason-Dixon line. The war impacted all four rabbis in indelible ways, and their lives take on new meaning when seen against the background of their wartime service. Their experiences and the responses they evoked offer insights into the war's impact as a major turning point in American and American Jewish history. There's a picture of Hebrew Union College, Cincinnati, Ohio. Then, on the facing page, there are pictures of Chaplain Fred W. Thyssen. Then it lists his denomination, Catholic left, Chaplain Ernest Pine, Protestant center, and Chaplain Jacob Rothschild, Jewish right. Students at the U.S. Army Chaplain School, Fort Benjamin Harrison, Indiana, 1942. It's ironic, the pictures are in the book, but I don't want to show them to the camera. We'll continue.